Sylvia was renowned in Harbour City as an aloof beauty. No matter what tricks the socialites tried, they couldn't even ruffle the hem of her dress. No one knew that such an ethereal, cold beauty had secretly been in a relationship with her stepbrother for 4 years. In public, they played the part of affectionate siblings. In private, they stole passionate kisses and tangled together every late night. Another night, Sylvia found someone beside her right on time, immediately after. The scorching chest slowly pressed against her back. A crisp scent mixed with tobacco and youthful vigor drifted over. Sylvia's body instantly tensed up. As soon as she turned around, her lips were covered by a soft touch. The boy's kiss was light, carrying a hint of hesitation, but his tongue restlessly brushed past the corner of her lips. "Are you crazy, Harlan?" Sylvia lowered her voice, pressing her fingertips firmly against his chest. "This is the old house. Mom and Dad are right upstairs. Go back to your own room," he chuckled softly, his warm breath brushing against her ear. "But what should I do if I miss my sister? Didn't sister say during the day that I'm the most well-behaved?" He buried his face in the crook of her neck, nuzzling gently. "Shouldn't sister give me a little reward then?" At this moment, he was nothing like his usual obedient and gentle self. His dark eyes burned with raw desire and aggression. "Sister, it's been so long since you've given it to me. Please satisfy me, okay?" Sylvia, her ears burned under his gaze. As if bewitched by his voice, she could no longer bring herself to refuse. But the usually obedient young man was unusually demanding tonight. After several rounds of intimacy, Harlan, finally satisfied and content, withdrew and headed to the bathroom. Sylvia was sleeping groggily when she was suddenly awakened by a vibration. She instinctively picked up her phone from the nightstand and glanced at the message that had popped up. "Holy shit, Harlan, your sister is absolutely intoxicating. Those moans made our bones go weak. Only Harlan knows how to have fun, delivering perks as promised. This time it was an audio livestream. When are we getting a video broadcast? I really want to see what the ice-cold goddess looks like in bed." Sylvia felt as if struck by a sudden blow, her entire body turning cold. Livestream? What livestream? Sylvia, before she could figure out what those words meant. Her phone started vibrating wildly again. Seeing the caller, Sylvia hesitated for 2 seconds before answering. The receiver immediately transmitted sobbing cries. "Harlan, I listened to you and got the abortion. Can we go back to how we were before? Please don't ignore me." The familiar female voice jolted Sylvia completely awake from her dazed state. "Shirley." She suddenly sat up, her voice cold as she asked, "The child you aborted recently, was it Harlan's?" The crying on the other end of the line suddenly stopped. "Sis, why is it you? How come Harlan's phone is with you? Answer me, is that bastard who got you pregnant and made you have an abortion Harlan?" Before the words even finished, all that was left in her ear was the busy signal. Sylvia's trembling fingers were just about to call back when another message popped up on WeChat. "Harlan, your little sweetheart is here threatening to kill herself after getting an abortion. Searching everywhere for you. We really can't handle this anymore. You need to come and calm her down." The sound of running water in the bathroom stopped at that moment. Sylvia's heart skipped a beat, and she hurriedly flipped her phone face down on the nightstand, closing her eyes to feign sleep. Before long, Harlan emerged. Afraid of waking Sylvia, he tiptoed to the bedside, picked up his phone and swiped a couple of times before casually tossing it aside and starting to get dressed. The next second, the door was gently closed. Sylvia slowly opened her eyes. She called a car and followed Harlan to a bar. As soon as the private room door was pushed open, a girl in a white dress immediately threw herself into his arms. "Harlan, you finally came to see me." Shirley tightly wrapped her arms around his waist. Sobbing softly, Harlan did not return her embrace, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, asking coldly, "Who told you to skip class and come back to the country?" "I called you but you didn't answer, sent messages but got no reply. I really missed you so much. I was wrong about that matter, and I've already terminated the pregnancy. Please don't ignore me." "Okay, Shirley, I've told you many times." His voice was icy, with obvious impatience. "We're over." "But why? Weren't we fine before?" Shirley asked through tears, refusing to let go. Harlan let out a light laugh, reached out to pinch her chin, forcing her to look up at him. "I'm your brother. And you actually want to marry your own brother. But we're not related by blood. I'll go talk to Dad." Harlan clicked his tongue lightly, interrupting her flustered explanation. "Do I have to spell it out for you? I'm bored of you. Is that reason enough? Don't be so clingy, it's pathetic." His tone was flippant and cold, completely different from the obedient and gentle demeanor he showed in front of Sylvia. Sylvia stared straight at that face, as if she had just woken from a dream. She could hardly tell which version of him was real anymore. It wasn't until the dull sound of a slap echoed through the room that Sylvia snapped back to reality. Watching as Shirley ran out crying, Her instinct was to chase after her, but the burst of mocking laughter from the private room froze her in her tracks. Ha ha ha, Harlan's charm is really something. Both the stepsister and the half-sister ended up in his bed, and the younger sister even went to extremes for him. I'm really curious. Which one tastes better, the older sister or the younger one? Definitely the older sister. Didn't you hear that voice message in the group tonight? Those soft moans got me hard. When Harlan gets tired of her, let me know, I'd like to take a shot at her too. You, give me a break. You wouldn't even get a chance to be the rebound. That figure of Sylvia's, so many in our circle are drooling over her. But she ignores everyone. Only our Harlan has the charm to win over even a goddess. But they've been together for years now. His phone must be overflowing with videos. Right, Harlan, when are you going to share them with us? Don't tell me you're too stingy. Listening to the vulgar conversation inside, Sylvia felt her blood run cold, her limbs freezing to the bone, reluctant to part. What a joke. Harlan deliberately got close to those two sisters back then just to get back at his stepfather. It wouldn't make sense to take a stab wound and then get himself entangled too. Is our Harlan the kind of person who'd do such a foolish thing? Revenge? Was their encounter merely the result of a vendetta? Sylvia looked up in disbelief, staring intently at the group in the private room, only to realize that several of them were the same thugs who had dragged her into the alley back then. During her freshman year, when she was dragged into an alley by a drunken thug, it was Harlan who saved her as he passed by, and at the critical moment, he took a fatal stab for her, an inch off, and it would have cost him his life. Over 30 days and nights of hospital care, from the initial guilt and gratitude, to later, Harlan's stubbornness in enduring pain while still trying to joke with her. And the clean, clear look in his eyes filled with deep affection when he occasionally gazed at her absent-mindedly. Later, they naturally ended up together. During this time, Sylvia never once doubted the coincidence from that night at the alley entrance, nor did she ever see through the calculation hidden beneath those clear eyes. It wasn't until a year later that the stepmother moved into Eugene's house with her son. The boy was wearing a clean white t-shirt, his eyes downcast, looking exceptionally well behaved, but Sylvia only wanted to escape. She began to avoid him, afraid to go home, afraid to go anywhere he might appear, until Harlan cornered her in the school storage room. In the darkness, Sylvia was pressed tightly against the door by him. The scar on his waist and abdomen, which she had touched countless times before, was now clearly imprinted on her through her thin shirt. Don't avoid me. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, nuzzling gently. His voice low and hoarse. Before we were together, I didn't know you were Uncle Jiang's daughter, but even if I had known, it wouldn't have mattered. I only want you, sister, don't push me away. The warm liquid dripped into the hollow of her neck, its heat making Sylvia's heart flutter. The young man carefully, restrainedly, pressed a light kiss to her lips. The salty taste spread between their lips and teeth, and Sylvia's heart softened unbearably. After that day, they got back together. They had been in love for 4 years. She had refused an arranged marriage for him, and he had promised her a future. But now, to think that his deliberate efforts to get close to her and her sister were nothing more than revenge for her father taking his father's position, Sylvia was almost amused by this absurd thought. But as soon as she lifted the corner of her lips, a tear unexpectedly fell. Harlan, why aren't you saying anything? Don't tell me you're having second thoughts. Second thoughts. Harlan lit a cigarette, took a drag, and slowly exhaled a smoke ring. I was just thinking about how to make that old fox suffer even more. How about we release those videos on his and my mom's wedding anniversary? Holy shit, both my precious daughters have become the stepson's playthings. Just thinking about it is thrilling. I can't wait to see old Fox Jiang, who dominates the business world, get publicly humiliated. The crowd burst into laughter, chattering excitedly. But Sylvia could no longer hear anything, her entire body beginning to tremble uncontrollably. Her heart ached with a dull, persistent pain, and tears streamed down uncontrollably. Sylvia hurriedly wiped them away and plunged headlong into the pouring rain without a second thought. By the time she returned to the old house, she was completely drenched. The bone-chilling cold had sobered her mind a little. She tiptoed upstairs, only to catch a glimpse of the warm yellow light seeping from the study on the second floor. The door was slightly ajar, and her father's hunched figure over the desk seemed more stooped than she remembered. Eugene's family business had suffered repeated setbacks in recent years. She was aware of that. But never before had she felt so keenly just how much pressure her father had been carrying alone. A year ago, the Giles family took the initiative to extend an olive branch for a marriage alliance. And father wanted to use this opportunity to regain momentum. But back then, in order to fulfill her promise with Harlan, she refused the marriage alliance, and father never forced her. Now that she knows Harlan had been approaching her with deception all along, Their agreement was invalid from the very beginning. In that case, she must find a time to delete those videos, and from now on, marriage and relationships will be based on individual freedom. They will have nothing to do with each other anymore. Dad, Mr. Eugene turned toward her at the sound of her voice. Let me marry into the Giles family. Mr. Eugene froze, then his eyes lit up with incredulous delight. But you said you had someone you liked and firmly refused any arranged marriage. Sylvia twisted her lips slightly. Not anymore, Mr. Eugene slowly stood up, walked around the desk to stand before Sylvia. Only when he touched her soaked clothes did he seem to realize something, his face instantly darkening. Did that boy bully you? Recalling those unspeakable conversations, Sylvia felt waves of pain in her heart again, but she couldn't worry her father any longer. She would handle those messy matters herself. No, this is my own choice. I'm willing to marry Darcy. After all, this was something she had dreamed of in her youth, even though it had long expired. All right, Mr. Eugene took a deep look at Sylvia, his eyes filled with overwhelming heartache. Go take a bath and get a good night's sleep first. We'll talk about the rest tomorrow. Sylvia responded and returned to her room. While passing by the side bedroom, she heard faint sobbing coming from inside. Sylvia raised her hand, knocked on the door, and pushed it open to enter. Sis, do you also think it's ridiculous to fall in love with your own stepbrother? Shirley looked at her with tear-filled eyes. But I've liked him since long ago, the person I had a crush on throughout my entire youth. How did he end up becoming my stepbrother? Later, he saw my diary and accepted me willingly. I thought my dream had come true, but I just made one mistake, and he abandoned me. Sis, please help me. Help me win him back. Okay. Looking at Shirley, whose face was streaked with tears, Sylvia felt a pang of heartache. Shirley, perhaps it's not your fault, but rather that he never truly cared for you from the start. Sincerity. Her voice suddenly rose sharply, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Then tell me, what is sincerity? Is being forever rational and forever correct like you what sincerity means? You simply don't understand him. Hearing this, Sylvia smiled self-deprecatingly. She had once made the same irrational and wrong decision, but Shirley had just entered university and still had a bright future ahead of her. There was no need for her to know about these disgusting, sordid matters right now. Shirley, you should go back to Canada to finish your studies first. When everything settles down, I'll tell you the whole truth. If by then you still like him, I won't stand in your way. Really, you'd really support me in Harlan, and help me convince Dad too. Sylvia nodded, on the condition that you complete your studies properly, and during this time you can't secretly contact Harlan. Shirley's eyes sparkled with joy. Sis, I'll listen to you. I'll go back tomorrow. Sylvia stayed with her chatting for a while longer, only returning to her room to take a shower after she had completely fallen asleep. Perhaps because she had been caught in the rain and caught a chill, Sylvia developed a fever that very night. She was burning up all over, and in her hazy state of consciousness, she could only faintly sense someone wiping her forehead with a warm towel. Sylvia struggled to open her eyes, and what came into view was Harlan's face. So close it was right before her eyes. She drowsily turned her head to avoid it, but in the next moment, he half forcibly pulled her into his embrace. Be good, take the medicine. Holding her, he brought the fever reducer and a glass of water to her lips, as the warm water slid down her throat. Sylvia closed her eyes, her voice hoarse. I've taken the medicine. I'll be fine after some sleep. You should go back. Sure, he interrupted her, wiping the water from her lips with his thumb. You've been saying that for 4 years. Have I ever listened? He leaned down, gently pressing his forehead against hers. Sleep, I'm here. The fever had left Sylvia completely drained of strength. Her mind was hazy as she closed her eyes. The next second, with a loud bang, the bedroom door was abruptly pushed open. Sis, I've been waiting for you all morning. Why aren't you up yet? I'm about to leave. Shirley's voice abruptly cut off, and the room instantly fell into dead silence. Sylvia suddenly opened her eyes and saw Shirley standing at the door. You. Shirley's voice trembled violently, the suitcase in her hand falling to the ground with a thud. She watched as Harlan pulled Sylvia into his embrace, her eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Shirley. It's not what you think. Sylvia tried to pull her hand back, but Harlan held it even tighter. It's exactly what you're thinking. He pulled her closer into his embrace, his voice calm yet resolute. Is there any problem with me taking care of my own girlfriend? Sylvia sharply cut him off. Harlan, shut up. Shirley stepped closer, tears instantly welling up in her eyes. So this is the real reason you were in such a hurry to send me abroad, isn't it? You said Harlan wasn't right for me, that he was too cunning, that I should focus on my studies. It was all for your own sake. Shirley, let me explain. It's complicated. Sylvia struggled to sit up, but as soon as she moved, she was overwhelmed by a wave of dizziness. Shirley sneered. Complicated, yeah. It sure is complicated, complicated enough for you to sneak around with your sister's boyfriend behind her back. Shirley, Harlan finally spoke, his voice cold and stern. Watch your language. His defense made Shirley even more distraught. So you broke up with me because you fell for my sister, is that it? Harlan didn't answer. The silence was like a knife, piercing through Shirley's last shred of hope. Sylvia pushed Harlan away abruptly. Shirley, trust your sister. You're not my sister, you're just a two-faced, selfish bitch. You knew exactly how much I liked him, yet you still had to steal him from me, when I was crying and begging you to help me win him back. Were you feeling smug inside? Did it feel amazing and satisfying to successfully seduce your own sister's boyfriend? Before the words had even finished, Shirley violently hurled the suitcase in her hand at Sylvia. Sylvia couldn't dodge in time, and the sharp corner instantly cut her forehead. Thick blood trickled down from her forehead, dripping onto the light pink bedsheet. Sylvia couldn't hold back a cry of pain. The high fever and the heavy blow caused her to instantly lose consciousness. Harlan stared at that glaring red, his face suddenly darkening. Shirley, there's a limit to being unreasonable. With that, he scooped Sylvia up into his arms and strode quickly toward the exit. Harlan, if you're protecting her, then what am I? Shirley blocked his path, her voice hoarse with desperation. What does this past year we've spent together even mean? Harlan glared at her coldly. I never admitted we were officially dating. Shirley widened her eyes abruptly, her voice trembling. Then why did you accept my confession? If it weren't for your sister asking me to be harsh with you and completely cut off your hopes, I wouldn't have given you a second glance. But after spending time together, I'm not completely indifferent to you either. Shirley's eyes, filled with hatred and despair, rekindled a glimmer of hope. Yet the very next moment, Harlan's voice shattered all her hopes completely. But compared to you, I still prefer your sister, after all. If I'm going to get married, I have to choose someone. Right, it was my sister who seduced you first, wasn't it? Shirley stood there, trembling all over. And it was my sister who told you to treat me like this. What if it is? Can you move aside now? Harlan impatiently pushed past her and carried Sylvia, whose head was covered in blood, to the hospital. When I woke up again, the wound on my forehead had already been bandaged. Sylvia instinctively surveyed the hospital room. Not a soul in sight. The phone on the bedside table kept vibrating. She instinctively picked it up and glanced at it, only to realize this was Harlan's phone. Remembering the video they had mentioned, Sylvia swiped to unlock the screen and tried entering the password several times, but still couldn't unlock it. A few new messages popped up on the screen. Sylvia got beaten up by her sister and hospitalized. Which hospital? I want to see. I absolutely can't miss this drama of two sisters fighting over love. Harlan's divide and conquer tactic is truly sophisticated. The group chat was buzzing with discussion. Sylvia felt a chill run down her spine as she read it. With their mother passing away early and their father busy with work, Shirley was practically raised by her. The two sisters had always been very close. Now, just for a man who's been toying with them, Shirley is even willing to fight her, have to admit. Harlan really knows how to destroy someone both physically and mentally, but as long as it can make Shirley give up, this might be for the best. Wait until she deletes the video, then explain it to her. Sylvia placed the phone back in its spot, her body still trembling uncontrollably. Has the fever not gone down yet? Why are you shaking so badly? Harlan set the retrieved medicine on the cabinet and reached out to feel her forehead. Sylvia turned her head away to avoid him, leaving his hand suspended mid-air as his eyes darkened. Is there nothing you need to explain? Her tone was cold and hard, but Harlan suddenly laughed. Are you jealous, sis? Because of Shirley, I did date her before, but it was only to completely sever her obsession. I rejected her many times, but she wouldn't give up, so I had to try a different approach. To break someone's infatuation, you just need to let them try it once. Shattering the perfect lover in their fantasy is more effective than a casual rejection, don't you think? He leaned down to look her straight in the eyes. But don't worry, sister, I haven't touched her. My heart only has room for you alone. Sylvia was stunned for a moment, unable to help but admire his excellent acting skills. He was so confident that Shirley wouldn't dare tell her about the abortion, which is why he dared to spout such nonsense so boldly. Sylvia scrutinized him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. Harlan clearly misunderstood, his gaze gradually falling to her lips as he lowered his head to kiss her. Sylvia abruptly turned her head away. You kept such a big matter from me. I haven't forgiven you yet. Harlan chuckled softly, nuzzling her neck. Then what can I do to earn your forgiveness? Sis, Sylvia lowered her gaze and asked softly, if I ask you to do anything, will you do it? Harlan nodded. Anything. Sylvia remained silent for 2 seconds before speaking. Then I want your phone passcode. Harlan was momentarily stunned, then laughed. Sis, do you want to check my phone? Don't worry, I'm clean. Feel free to check. He casually recited a string of numbers. Sylvia couldn't help but ask, does this string of numbers have any special meaning? Harlan looked at her and smiled. My father's death anniversary. Sylvia felt a sudden pang in her heart. I'm sorry, Harlan waved it off. It's nothing, I just didn't want to forget. But I keep my sister's birthday here. He tapped his finger against his heart. Sylvia couldn't laugh at all. It wasn't that he couldn't remember his father's death anniversary. It felt more like a reminder. He went through so much trouble to take revenge on Eugene's family. Could it be that Harlan's father's death wasn't an accident? Sylvia felt a sudden chill run down his spine. She claimed to be tired, closed her eyes to rest. Harlan answered a phone call and got up to leave the hospital room. Sylvia opened her eyes, took out her phone, opened the chat with her best friend, and typed a line. Help me find a private detective to investigate the reason behind Harlan's father's death back then. A reply came quickly. Your stepbrother, you're quite concerned about him. Alright, I'll contact you when I have any leads. The strong smell of disinfectant in the air made Sylvia's head throb. She put away her phone and got up to get some fresh air in the hallway. When she turned back, she saw at the far end of the corridor, Harlan, who had been away for a long time, holding a slender girl and gently comforting her. The girl lifted her face, tears still clinging to her lashes, and he patiently wiped them away with his thumb. Sylvia had seen the obedient facade he deliberately put on in front of her, and she had also witnessed the undisguised coldness and harshness he showed to others. He had never shown such accommodating and gentle expression to anyone before, so this is what is like when he drops the mask. Sylvia suppressed the bitterness rising in her heart and turned back to the hospital room. Just as she lay down, her phone rang. Sylvia, as soon as she answered, Mr. Eugene's cheerful voice came through. Sylvia. The marriage alliance matter has been settled between Dad and the Giles family. The announcement of the alliance will be made next week during the celebration of your Aunt Lan and my wedding anniversary. It's perfect, a double blessing. If you have any requests, you can also bring them up with Dad. I have no requests. Sylvia lowered her gaze. The only request is to keep it confidential until the announcement is made. Before the words had fully left her mouth, the door to the hospital room was pushed open. Sylvia quickly hung up the phone and looked up, meeting Harlan's gaze. Keep it a secret. What secret? He leaned in closer, his overwhelming presence making Sylvia instinctively shrink back, but he reached out and pulled her into his embrace. Does sister have secrets from me now? Sylvia looked at him and suddenly realized that no matter how much he tried to blend in with everyday life, that innate sense of aggression was ingrained in his bones. Sylvia lowered her gaze and made up an excuse. Isn't your birthday coming up soon? I just wanted to prepare a surprise for you. Sis, haven't you always known what I want the most? Harlan, his arms tightened around her waist. When is my sister planning to make our relationship public and give me a proper status? In previous years, he had always asked such questions on her birthday. She thought he was madly in love with her. But she never expected that he just wanted to use her to embarrass his father. Sylvia, she pressed against his shoulder and gently pushed him away, murmuring vaguely, soon, we won't have anything to do with each other. On his birthday, Harlan's group of friends threw him a birthday party at the club. Harlan had just walked through the club entrance with Sylvia when someone came up and called him away. He turned back and told Sylvia, go ahead to the private room and have some fun. I need to pick someone up and we'll be right back. Sylvia nodded and followed the waiter to the private room. Pushing open the door, the private room was dimly lit and filled with swirling smoke. A dozen men with hair dyed in all sorts of colors were gathered around a table, gambling. She furrowed her brows and instinctively wanted to back out, but her wrist was suddenly grabbed by a man with a full-sleeve tattoo. He looked her up and down Sylvia and suddenly let out a sharp whistle. Damn. This girl really is as fresh and tender as the rumors say. We're in for a treat tonight. Boys, let go. My boyfriend is right outside. Don't you dare do anything. Sylvia struggled to pull her hand back, but was violently thrown onto the sofa. The back of her head hit the armrest, causing a wave of dizziness. She was like a piece of meat suddenly thrown into a pack of wolves. Anyone could take a bite. The wandering hands all over her body made her sick to her stomach. She struggled desperately, screaming Harlan's name, only to be met with a sharp slap across the face. Sylvia's cheek instantly swelled up, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Stop yelling. You're the goods your brother Harlan personally delivered. Last time he broke our Marquess head over some woman, so we kidnapped his girl. He promised to exchange you for her himself. As he spoke, he pinched Sylvia's slender waist and let out a lecherous laugh. For a piece like this, that bastard Harlan actually had the heart to give you up. Ha ha ha, get away, don't touch me. Sylvia slapped his hand away, the tears she had been holding back finally bursting through like a dam. "You bitch, don't know when you're being given face," the yellow-haired guy cursed. And then she took another punch to the abdomen. The sharp, cramping pain made her curl up, almost suffocating. "Alright, don't beat her up too badly," a man who seemed to be the leader spoke up. He poured 3 full glasses of strong liquor and pushed them in front of Sylvia. "Little sister, you've ruined our brother's fun. How about this? You drink these 3 glasses, apologize, and we'll let you go. What do you say?" Sylvia stared at the glasses of liquor. How could she not know they were drugged? There was no way she could walk out of this room completely unscathed today. But what made her even more desperate than her current predicament was that she had never imagined Harlan would treat her like this. After 4 years of living together day and night, even if you raised a dog, you'd develop some feelings, right? But of all people, he, Harlan, has no heart. Her heart suddenly tightened. Sylvia clenched her fists tightly, wiped away her tears, and stood up. "Fine, I'll drink it, but you have to keep your word." The people surrounding her automatically made way. Sylvia walked over, and as she passed the doorway, she suddenly pulled the door open and tried to rush out. "Help, MPH." Before she could even call for help, she was dragged back by her hair. "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit," the yellow-haired man sneered, grabbing a glass of liquor and forcing it into her mouth. The pungent liquid made her choke and cough violently. The alcohol mixed with her tears, smearing across her face, some of it trickling down her chin and soaking the front of her clothes. Amid the chaos, someone tore open her clothes. The whistles and jeers around her grew even more excited. She felt nothing but nausea as tears of humiliation silently streamed down her face. Just as boundless despair was about to overwhelm her, the door of the private room was kicked open with a crash. Harlan charged in like a demon from hell. He grabbed a wine bottle and smashed it against the head of the short, stout man who was pinning Sylvia down. The man let out a sharp cry of pain and collapsed to the floor. The others, snapping back to reality, all grabbed their weapons. Harlan darted past the main table and pressed the dagger in his hand against the neck of the man in the main seat. "Let her go, or we all die together. Mark, what woman haven't you seen? Surely it's not worth risking your life for a moment of pleasure, is it?" Someone cursed and told Harlan to put down the knife. The atmosphere was tense and hostile. A police siren suddenly blared downstairs. The man called Mark waved his hand and smiled. "We live in a society governed by law. No need to brandish knives and guns at the slightest provocation. Everyone was just joking around. You guys really went too far. How could you treat such a beauty like this? Hurry up and let her go." The crowd instinctively cleared a path, until she fell into a broad embrace. Sylvia could no longer hold on, her vision went black, and she fainted. When she woke again, she found herself lying in a hospital bed. The hospital room was empty and quiet, so quiet that Sylvia could hear voices talking in the hallway. "Harlan, didn't we agree before? Let Sylvia take Nina's place to atone. After all, she's Mr. Eugene's daughter. If his own precious daughter, the one he doted on so much, gets gang-raped, not only will Mr. Eugene be devastated when he finds out. He'll definitely seek justice for his daughter. Let them fight like dogs. Wouldn't that kill 2 birds with 1 stone? But why did you suddenly change your mind? Calling the police was already us being merciful, yet you recklessly charged in and wrecked Mark's place. If the police hadn't arrived in time, you would have lost your life. Mark suffered this silent loss today. Do you think he'll let it go? Offending him for the daughter of your enemy? I think you've really gone mad." Harlan flicked the ash from his cigarette and said nothing. The group of brothers exchanged glances, their expressions turning somewhat grim. Finally, someone couldn't hold back and asked, "Harlan, you're not really falling for Sylvia, are you? Her father was the one who drove the car that killed your dad. You've spent all these years meticulously planning your revenge. If you actually fall for his daughter, wouldn't that mean you've—" Sylvia clamped her hand tightly over her mouth, stifling a gasp that nearly escaped. How could this be? Impossible. Father would never kill anyone. Although he is a businessman, he upholds righteousness and morality, and despite his high position, he never uses his power to oppress others. In recent years, he has treated Harlan as his own son, never showing favoritism based on blood ties. How could such a person commit murder? The voices outside continued, but she could no longer make out anything clearly, her ears buzzing with a deafening noise. Tears involuntarily streamed down. Suddenly, footsteps sounded. Sylvia hurriedly wiped away her tears and closed her eyes. The next second, the hospital room door was pushed open. She could feel the scorching gaze fixed on her from beside the bed. After a long while, he leaned down, his cool fingertips brushing past the corner of her eye. Sylvia pretended to turn over casually, burying the tears she couldn't hold back into the pillow, until the truth was uncovered. She wouldn't believe anyone's nonsense again. There was nothing seriously wrong with her body, Harlan had already completed the discharge procedures for her early in the morning and brought her home. As soon as she pushed the door open, Sylvia immediately spotted the girl sitting on the sofa. It was the girl Harlan had been holding at the hospital. "You're back, Sylvia." Her stepmother Pearl waved enthusiastically and introduced her. "This is my best friend's daughter, Nina. Her mother is in the hospital, and since we're close by, it's convenient for her to go back and forth to take care of her. I've invited her to stay with us for a while." Nina immediately stood up, her voice soft and sweet. "Hello, sister, sorry for the intrusion." Sylvia gazed at the girl's face for a moment, then gave a slight nod. After breakfast was ready, they took their seats as usual. At the table, Pearl and Nina chatted and laughed while reminiscing about childhood memories. Carried away by the conversation, Pearl suddenly seemed to remember something and said half jokingly, half seriously, "Oh, that reminds me, Nina and Harlan were actually betrothed to each other as children." Before the words had even finished, Sylvia felt a scorching gaze fall upon her. She calmly lifted her eyes and met Harlan's deep, penetrating gaze. Then, unusually, she responded, "Is that so? They seem quite well matched then." As soon as these words were spoken, Harlan's eyes suddenly turned cold. Pearl couldn't stop grinning. "Does Sylvia think so too? I knew it. My eye for a daughter-in-law can't be wrong." Nina's face flushed red as she coquettishly retorted, "Aunt Wang, that was just a joke from so many years ago." "It's the jokes that hold the truth. Harlan should really get a girlfriend by now. If only, Mom." Harlan's voice carried a warning tone. "Mr. Eugene timely put down his bowl and chopsticks. You shouldn't meddle in young people's affairs. If the children are meant to be together, they'll naturally find their way. Sylvia, come to your father's study after finishing your meal." "Okay." Sylvia acknowledged and followed him to the study. Mr. Eugene discussed the follow-up matters of the arranged marriage with her in detail. By the time she left the study, it was already noon. The servants and stepmother were probably taking their afternoon nap, and the villa was quiet. She closed the study door and was about to return to her room when a pair of strong hands pressed her against the corridor wall. Then, a flurry of kisses rained down. She bit her lip hard to swallow her screams. Just one wall away, if her father opened the door, he would see this provocative scene. Sylvia dodged, trying to break free from his grip, but the more she struggled, Harlan kissed her more fiercely. She instinctively opened her mouth to bite him, but instead, he bit her hard. A sharp pain shot through the corner of her lips. She couldn't hold back a low moan, tears welling up in her eyes. "Harlan, you're crazy." "Perfect match." His voice was low, carrying suppressed anger. "Why don't you shout it out? Better yet, let them all come out and see what our relationship really is. Who exactly is my girlfriend?" Sylvia turned her face away. "It's just an act. Why are you taking it so seriously?" "I don't like it." He stepped back slightly, resting his forehead against the crook of her neck and murmuring, "Don't say things like that next time. I know you blame me. I'm sorry. I didn't protect you well enough. This kind of thing won't happen again." Sylvia froze in place. She couldn't tell whether his emotions at this moment were genuine or fake, but regardless of their authenticity, she would no longer believe them. A pit. One fall is enough. A person loved wrongly. She would not keep either. In the following days, Harlan stayed by her side almost without leaving an inch. But ever since she proactively asked for the password, it became very difficult to get hold of Harlan's phone again. With only 3 days left until the banquet, Sylvia couldn't help but feel a bit anxious. She deliberately drank a few extra glasses at the party, and after Harlan picked her up as usual to go home, she took advantage of the alcohol and actively kissed his lips. Harlan immediately took the initiative, wrapping one arm around her waist and deepening the kiss. Sylvia eagerly removed his coat, but just as things were about to spiral out of control, she abruptly turned her head away, evading his scorching lips, and murmured indistinctly, "Go take a shower." Harlan's movements suddenly froze. He propped himself up, gazing at her from an extremely close distance. Those eyes were swirling with lingering passion, along with a hint of astonishment at being abruptly interrupted. His Adam's apple bobbed violently as he slowly released her, got up, and strode toward the bathroom. Sylvia listened to the sound of running water coming from the bathroom, quietly got up, picked up the coat from the floor, and fished out the phone from its pocket. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like it might burst out of her chest, her fingers trembling. She found the private album and deleted those videos one by one. The moment the recycle bin was completely emptied, she finally felt a hint of relief. Just as she put the phone back exactly where it had been, the sound of running water from the bathroom suddenly stopped. Harlan walked out with his hair still dripping water. Sylvia was about to say something when he wrapped his arm around her waist, pressing her back onto the bed. A warm, damp kiss descended upon her. She instinctively pressed her hands against his chest. "Wait." She turned her head to avoid him, but her words were swallowed by his deeper kiss, until the urgent ring of a cell phone cut through the moment. Harlan paused his movements, his brow furrowed tightly, clearly extremely impatient at being interrupted, but the ringing persisted insistently. He finally released Sylvia, pulled out his phone, and answered the call. Whatever was said on the other end of the line, his expression abruptly changed. The previous arousal instantly faded, replaced by a swiftly passing shadow of gloom in his eyes. Harlan hung up the phone, casually threw on his clothes, and pulled Sylvia toward the door. Sylvia's wrist ached from his tight grip, and she instinctively tried to shake off his hand, only for him to hold on even tighter. Harlan, what's gotten into you all of a sudden? Nina has been kidnapped. They specifically asked for you to go. As soon as the words were spoken, Sylvia's heart clenched violently. So, she looked up at him. Are you going to trade me? Harlan avoided her gaze. Your father is Mr. Eugene. They won't really do anything to you. His tone could be considered gentle, yet it was like an ice pick, brutally piercing Sylvia's heart. Harlan, what you should do is call the police, not push me out. Calling the police would put her in danger. She can't be harmed. Don't worry, once she's safely out, I'll find a way to save you. You just need to buy some time. Nina is timid and can't handle being frightened. Sylvia interrupted him. I won't go. If you really want to trade me for Nina, then we're breaking up, sis. Don't say such childish things at a time like this. Sylvia wanted to say more, but suddenly felt a dull pain at the back of her neck. She stared in astonishment at Harlan. Her vision instantly went black, and her body went limp as she collapsed. When she woke up again, the scene before her sent a chill through her entire body. Sis, it seems you don't hold much weight in Harlan's heart after all. He actually went ahead and knocked you out to bring you here when told to replace you. Shirley sat cross-legged beside Mark, unable to conceal her gloating expression. In an instant, Sylvia understood everything. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was a trap specifically set for her, orchestrated by her own younger sister in collaboration with outsiders. Sylvia stood frozen in place, a chill rising from the depths of her heart. Shirley, have you gone mad? Shirley glared at her with hatred. I learned it all from you, sister. Didn't you also team up with an outsider to deceive me for all those years? Since you're so desperate for men, I'll just give you a few more, so you can have your fill of fun all at once. I'm not lying to you, it's— Shut up. A sharp slap landed on her face. Shirley's acrylic nail scraped across her cheek, leaving a long bloody mark. I won't believe a single word you say. You're so proud of your ability to string men along, aren't you? Well, take a look at your self-righteous affection. Sylvia followed the direction she was pointing and saw Harlan carrying Nina out from another room. Nina buried her head in his chest and sobbed softly. Harlan whispered soothingly, Don't be afraid, it's all right now, I'll take you home. He carried her quickly downstairs, never once looking back at her from start to finish. Sylvia suddenly remembered his promise from 2 days ago that he would protect her from now on. Fortunately, she hadn't believed it. Fortunately, her heart would no longer be stirred by him. TSK, sis, seeing your man holding another woman, treating you like worn-out shoes, your heart must be shattered, right? Your skills at seducing men aren't that great either, Shirley sneered, waiting to see Sylvia fall apart. However, Sylvia just looked at her expressionlessly. Her calm, deathly still gaze made Shirley inexplicably feel a pang of guilt. Before she could speak, Mark suddenly stood up. All right, the children's game of make-believe is over. Time to play some adult games. After saying that, he flung the limp Sylvia onto the bed. Sylvia, with her hands tied behind her back, hit the back of her head hard against the headboard. The loud crash startled Shirley. Didn't you promise you'd just scare her and not actually do anything to her? Little sister, I've played the game you wanted to play. Now, it's Big Brother's turn to play. Shirley widened her eyes abruptly. Mark, if you dare do anything to my sister, my dad will. Before she could finish her words, Mark backhandedly slapped her across the face. Don't even mention your dad. Even if the King of Heaven himself showed up today, I'm determined to have my way with you and your sister. He tore open her shirt. Shirley cried out and struggled to get up. Sylvia staggered off the bed and shielded Shirley behind her. Let her go. What's the fun in playing with a clueless little brat? If you want to play, I'll play with you. However you want to play is fine. Sis, get the hell out of here. Mark waved his hand with a smile. Shirley was dragged out. Before Sylvia could collect herself, that hand suddenly grabbed her hair and yanked it back, nearly tearing her scalp off. He grabbed her by the hair and threw her forcefully onto the bed. A black leather belt raised high in the air before lashing down heavily on her body. Sylvia arched her back in pain. The rough hemp rope dug deep into her wrists, and she bit her lip until it bled to swallow the scream. The whip fell like rain, lashing her until her skin split and flesh tore. She bit her lip hard, humiliation and pain causing tears to spill uncontrollably. Just as her consciousness began to blur, Mark grabbed her by the hair and pressed her firmly against the windowsill. "Can that kid Harlan satisfy you? Why not come with me instead?" The sound of a zipper being undone came from behind. Sylvia, seizing the moment, she abruptly flipped over and leaped, her body crashing heavily out the window, bang, at the same time. The door was kicked open with a violent force. In the instant of rapid descent, Sylvia seemed to hear Harlan screaming her name with heart-wrenching agony. When consciousness returned, her entire body ached as if it had been crushed. Sylvia struggled to open her eyes, meeting Harlan's bloodshot ones. "Sis, you're finally awake." The joy in his eyes didn't seem fake, but Sylvia just closed her eyes again in annoyance. Harlan lowered his gaze. "I know you resent me, but I have no choice. Nina's mother showed me great kindness, and now she's critically ill. Her only worry is Nina. I promised to take care of her for her mother. Nina went through all this because of me. I can't abandon her. But you're my girlfriend. You should share my burdens, shouldn't you? I told you I would find a way to save you. There was no need for you to take such a risk yourself. If only you had waited a little longer. Besides, even if Mark had done something to you, I wouldn't have minded. Why are you so foolish? Did he really think she jumped to preserve her chastity for him?" Sylvia laughed in extreme anger and abruptly opened her eyes. Just as she was about to say something, Harlan's phone suddenly rang. He picked up the phone. The sharp sound of crying was especially clear in the quiet night. "Harlan, my mom just went into the operating room. I'm so scared." Harlan turned abruptly and walked toward the door of the hospital room. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." The door closed, cutting off the sounds from outside. For the next 2 days, Harlan never came again. Instead, her best friend Nancy came with the investigation results. Sylvia burst into laughter after reading all the materials, but as she laughed, her eyes turned red. Her reaction startled Nancy, who tried to take the folder from her hand to take a look. The next second, she tore the document to shreds. Nancy stared at her in astonishment, but before she could speak, she heard her say, "Help me with the discharge procedures. The banquet is about to begin. Are you crazy? Your body hasn't recovered yet. It's just an anniversary. Is it worth risking your life to attend? It's more than that. It's also the day to announce my engagement to Darcy, marriage alliance, who's getting married." Harlan led Nina into the room. Who else could it be but Nan? "It's Nancy," Sylvia interjected, casting a complicated glance at Harlan. "Her family has been discussing a marriage alliance recently." Harlan responded casually, then stared at Sylvia and asked, "Sister, are you going to the banquet?" Sylvia remained silent for a few seconds, avoiding his gaze, and shook her head, looking at Nina, who seemed to hesitate. Sylvia asked, "Is there anything else?" Nina was about to say something when Harlan cut in. "Nina's mother passed away. I want to take her in and care for her from now on." Sylvia hadn't yet spoken when Nancy first laughed. "Sylvia, you and your stepbrother get along quite well. He needs your approval as his sister just to take care of his girlfriend." After these words were spoken, no one responded. Harlan just calmly watched Sylvia, waiting for her response. Sylvia nodded. "As you wish." Hearing her response, Harlan lifted his lips into a smile, a complex emotion she couldn't decipher flashing in his eyes, before Sylvia could ponder it further. Harlan continued on his own. "I've been busy with the funeral these past 2 days and neglected you. Once the banquet is over, I'll come to the hospital to properly keep you company." Sylvia nodded. After watching Harlan leave, she turned her gaze to Nancy. "Let's go too. The banquet is about to start." The banquet hall was filled with clinking glasses and bustling conversations, a gathering of distinguished guests. Harlan had just stepped into the hall when a group of his brothers swarmed around him, their faces alight with eager anticipation for the drama about to unfold. "Harlan, you're finally here. We've got our own people backstage. Once that old fox finishes his speech, the video will be projected on the big screen. I wonder if that old fox will be so furious seeing his 2 precious daughters being so wild in bed that he spits blood. Ha 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 ha. Too bad the 2 leading ladies aren't here, or this show would definitely be even more thrilling." The group of people chattered and laughed boisterously. Harlan rubbed his glass, saying nothing. The brothers exchanged glances, and one couldn't help but ask, "Harlan, you've been planning for so long, surely you're not getting soft-hearted now?" Harlan watched the beaming Mr. Eugene effortlessly navigate the social scene of fame and fortune, and let out a cold snort. "Soft-hearted? I'm just thinking, will he still be able to laugh when he sees the video later?" Just then, thud, the lights in the entire banquet hall suddenly went out. Amid the brief commotion, a spotlight shone. Mr. Eugene stood smiling in front of the microphone. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I'd like to take this opportunity to share some joyful news." Harlan lazily watched Mr. Eugene on the stage, a playful smile gradually curling at the corner of his lips. Mr. Eugene's voice echoed through the speakers to every corner. Eugene family group and Giles family group will formally unite through marriage. My daughter Sylvia will be engaged to Giles family group's heir, Mr. Darcy. The next second, Sylvia, who should have been lying in a hospital bed, walked slowly onto the stage. Holding Darcy's hand, the hall immediately erupted with waves of applause and exclamations of surprise. Harlan's group of brothers were especially stirred up. An arranged marriage, what does that mean? Didn't Sylvia swear she would only marry Harlan? She even turned down this marriage proposal for Harlan's sake. So why is it suddenly being announced now? Isn't it obvious? It must be Harlan repeatedly pushing Sylvia to take the fall in order to save Nina. Sylvia is jealous, no doubt about it. She's definitely using this marriage alliance to force Harlan to change his mind. It's a classic case of playing hard to get, a tactic women often use. Announcing the marriage alliance now just makes things more interesting. When the video comes out later, will Sylvia's fiancé still want her after seeing it? Ha 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 ha. Listening to his brother's varied discussions, Harlan felt the anxiety that had risen in his heart diminish slightly. He looked over and felt that Sylvia's hand resting on Darcy's arm was glaringly white. As if sensing his intense gaze, Sylvia looked over. Their eyes met for a moment before quickly looking away. Seeing she showed no trace of guilt or panic at being caught, Harlan instantly let out an angry laugh. He leaned against a corner pillar, fingers idly stroking his wine glass, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. He even nodded along when others commented on how well-matched the two looked. But the next moment, with a crack, the wine glass shattered instantly. The sound was drowned out by thunderous applause. He watched Sylvia walk down the stage with Darcy, and on the last step, she stumbled slightly. Harlan instinctively stepped forward, only to see Darcy wrap an arm around her waist. Are you okay? Darcy turned his head and asked in a low voice. Are you feeling unwell somewhere? Let me take you back to rest. Sylvia's injuries hadn't fully healed yet, and standing for a long time made her limbs feel weak. But she didn't want Mr. Eugene to worry. Just as she was about to shake her head and decline, several business elites approached with glasses in hand, all smiles. Mr. Darcy, MS, Sylvia, congratulations. Truly a perfect match, an ideal couple. Sylvia, my dear, today's announcement is truly joyous news. Mr. Darcy is young and accomplished, and you must support each other from now on. Congratulations rose one after another, instantly enveloping the two of them. Darcy had to first release his arm from around Sylvia's waist and respond to everyone's well wishes together with her. He chatted, clinked glasses, and laughed effortlessly with the crowd. But his gaze never strayed from Sylvia beside him, whose face had turned slightly pale. After finally finding a gap, Darcy politely extricated himself from the crowd and half-shielded Sylvia as they entered a lounge. Rest here for a while. Don't push yourself. He pushed the door open, his tone gentle yet leaving no room for argument. I'll handle things outside. Sylvia nodded, her voice tinged with weariness. All right, thank you. No need to be formal with me. Darcy gave her a deep look, said nothing more, and quietly closed the door. The lounge instantly fell silent. Sylvia let out a long sigh, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She slowly walked to the sofa and sat down, rubbing her throbbing temples as she closed her eyes, until a faint sound came from the doorway. Sylvia suddenly opened her eyes. Harlan stood right by the door, his tall figure blocking most of the light, casting a heavy shadow inside the room. He didn't know how long he had been standing there, his gaze deep and profound, like a cold pool with turbulent undercurrents, fixed tightly on her. He didn't speak, just watched her quietly like that, and the air instantly became thick and oppressive. Sister, don't you think you owe me an explanation? Harlan took step by step closer, finally stopping before her, gazing down at her from above. As you can see, I have married Darcy. Sylvia lifted her eyes and looked at him calmly, her gaze empty and devoid of any emotion he had anticipated. This meaningless calm instead inexplicably fueled the anger in his heart. Sister, he spoke, his voice dangerously low with a barely perceptible mockery. Is this your retaliation? By marrying Darcy? He leaned down, bracing his hands on the sofa armrests, trapping her between himself and the couch, his breath closing in. So, after seeing me take care of Nina these days, you couldn't wait to find yourself a backer and put on this transferring affections act for me to see? Harlan, Sylvia finally spoke, her voice soft but exceptionally clear. Are you overthinking things? Overthinking? He let out a light laugh, as if he'd heard some absurd joke. You've been acting distant ever since you saw me with Nina, and now you're going against our agreement, secretly arranging a marriage with Darcy. Sister, tell me, if this isn't playing hard to get, then what is? He stared at her, trying to find a crack in her expression, some evidence that she was acting. Yet she remained calm all along. After a long while, he seemed to concede defeat, letting out a low sigh. Nina's mother asked me to look after her. I only see her as a younger sister. She's not like you, there's always someone to back you up. Can't you just take pity on her? Harlan glanced at her, his eyes tinged with helplessness and reproach. Stop making a scene with me. If you're angry, you can hit me or scold me, but don't force my hand like this, not even out of spite. Go and call off the engagement. I'll arrange another apartment for Nina. She won't be living with us. Is that acceptable? Sylvia shook her head. But before she could speak, Harlan cut her off. Sister, I'm not discussing this with you. Sylvia let out a light laugh, suddenly unable to read him. Hadn't he approached her for revenge? Instead of focusing on whether his plan had succeeded, he was now clinging to her relentlessly. Harlan, do you really think you've covered all your tracks perfectly? Our problem was never Nina. It was you. We're over, and I won't be calling off the engagement. Sylvia reached out to push him away. But he grabbed her wrist and pinned it above her head. Over, he chuckled lowly, his warm breath brushing against her ear. Did I agree to that? Back when you pushed me aside to exchange for Nina, I told you then, if you're going to trade me for Nina, we're breaking up. From that moment on, we were already over. Harlan suppressed the smile on his lips. So, you've been planning to leave me since then? No, strictly speaking, we were never together in the first place. So how can you call it leaving? It was just an act, and I simply don't want to play along anymore. Harlan, you've wrapped up your role in my world. Get lost. Harlan suddenly burst into laughter. Sis, do you think deleting the video will solve everything? He raised his hand, a black USB drive held between his slender fingers. I've got plenty of these. Sis, can you delete them all? Sylvia suddenly changed her expression and abruptly raised her hand to slap him. Harlan turned his face to the side, then slowly turned back, pressing his tongue against his burning cheek and smiled. Sister, you've got quite the strength in your hand. You're truly disgusting. Harlan was completely unfazed, his smile deepening. He leaned close to her and whispered, but before, sister's body didn't say that. Sylvia, her pupils trembled, and she instinctively shrank back, but he pulled her even tighter into his embrace, leaving her with no escape. Harlan, what exactly do you want to do? A barely noticeable tremor crept into her voice. What do I want? Don't you already know? Sister, you had your good friend investigate my father's death. Wasn't that to find out what I'm after? I handed you the truth, but you tore it up. Was the outcome not to your liking? How did you know? You've been tapping my phone. A chill shot up from the base of her spine, straight to the crown of her head, that damp, sinister feeling of being watched by a venomous snake lying in wait in its cave left Sylvia's limbs numb. Sylvia stared at him for a long moment, unable to process it. No wonder he always knew her movements. No wonder he understood her so thoroughly. This isn't called surveillance. It's the most basic trust between lovers. Sister and I should be completely open with each other, shouldn't we? But why did you break our promise and agree to marry another man? You know perfectly well I don't like it. The teasing in his eyes faded, replaced by a subtle, almost twisted sense of control and possessiveness. Shocked, Sylvia shouted in desperate fury, and what about you? You knew perfectly well your actions would destroy everything, including our relationship, but you did it anyway. You knew from the start that I was aware of all your plans, yet you stood by and watched me run around in circles. You've won, Harlan, so go ahead and ruin everything. Just release the video, and Darcy won't want me anymore. The Eugene family will become the laughingstock of the entire harbor city. Your goal will be achieved, so why are you stilling me? Tears that had been held back for so long finally began to fall. Harlan stared straight at her. I won't do that. I never intended to release those videos. His fingers gently brushed across her cheek, wiping away her tears. Sister is mine. How could anyone else be worthy of seeing sister's body? Sylvia froze for a moment. Then what was all this for? Why, of course it's because. Harlan curved his lips into a smile. I want to drive away everyone around my sister. He schemed to turn the two sisters against each other, then fueled the situation to make Sylvia uncover the truth. He wanted to see how Sylvia would react upon learning that her father had killed his father in a car accident, and who she would choose between him and her father. Unfortunately, I am not my sister's firm choice, nor am I her only one. There are so many people in my sister's world, best friends, family, you care about all their opinions, afraid to disrupt the peace, so you don't dare to make our relationship public. But I only have my sister left. Still, it's okay. His kiss landed on her tear-dampened eyelashes, his voice low like a demon's whisper. Once I send your dad to prison, my sister will only have me. Sylvia suddenly turned her head away. Her voice sharp. It was your dad who suddenly rushed out drunk to block my dad's car. That's why my dad couldn't break in time and hit him. Just because your mom married my dad, does that mean he deserves to be extorted by your dad? My father has already paid off his gambling debts for him, that's more than enough kindness. Yet he remains insatiable and still dares to come chasing after my dad for money. Your father is nothing but a bottomless pit that can never be filled, and you, unable to distinguish right from wrong, play with emotions under the guise of revenge. If I had known that marrying your mother would lead to so much trouble, I should never have agreed to my father's decision to bring her into our family back then. That way, my sister and I would never have met a scumbag like you. You and your father are nothing but a curse. As soon as the words were spoken, the room fell into a deathly silence. Sylvia trembled all over. Watching Harlan's gradually reddening eyes, she thought her heart had long been numb, but a sudden, suffocating pain seized her, making it almost impossible to breathe. After a long time, Harlan finally nodded slightly, the corner of his mouth twisting into an almost distorted curve. Yes, I'm scum, I'm a jinx. He suddenly raised his hand. Sylvia's pupils contracted, and she instinctively turned her head to dodge, but then heard footsteps coming from the corridor. Then came the sound of Darcy talking to someone. Sylvia's heart suddenly tightened, and she abruptly tried to push Harlan away, yet the arm wrapped around her waist remained completely still. Sylvia hissed in a low, angry voice, "Harlan, let me go." Harlan let out a derisive, mocking laugh. "What? Afraid he'll find out about our relationship? Or afraid he'll discover we're having an affair?" The word affair made Sylvia frown involuntarily, but before she could speak, the sound of footsteps in the hallway suddenly grew louder, approaching from a distance, and then stopped right outside the door. Then came a knock at the door. "Sylvia, I'm coming in." Her heart suddenly raced wildly, and she struggled even harder to break free from Harlan's restraint. Harlan, however, wrapped his arm around her waist and made her straddle him. Then leisurely watched as she grew so frantic that sweat beaded on her forehead. The sound of the doorknob turning came through clearly. Click. The moment the door was pushed open, smack, all the lights in the entire hotel abruptly and completely went out without warning, and even the faint moonlight outside the window was blocked by the heavy curtains. The sudden darkness made Darcy stop at the doorway. He tentatively called out, "Sylvia, are you still in there? It's probably just a tripped circuit breaker. Don't be afraid." In the darkness, Sylvia's heart was about to leap out of her chest. Almost without thinking, her hands, which had been pushing against Harlan's chest, suddenly shot upward, firmly covering his lips in an attempt to block any sound he might make. In the midst of extreme panic, this action became another form of closeness. Harlan's body visibly stiffened. Immediately, Sylvia felt a very faint vibration coming from his chest. He was laughing. The laughter was low and hoarse, filled with mockery and a certain triumphant madness. Then, an even more damp and hot kiss, carrying undisguised mockery and a sense of ruin, landed on her palm, fine and tingling. He was even gently licking the lines on her palm with the tip of his tongue. This bastard. He was enjoying it, enjoying her panic, enjoying this thrill that felt like a secret affair. Sylvia stood rigid, not daring to move a muscle. Her ears filled with Darcy's approaching footsteps and the drumming of her own heart. The faint glow of a phone flashlight swept across the sofa. Darcy's deep, magnetic voice sounded, "Sylvia." Sylvia widened her eyes abruptly, her heart leaping into her throat, her limbs turning cold. She released Harlan. Just as she was about to respond, Darcy's phone suddenly vibrated violently. The phone ringtone sounded particularly piercing in the quiet night. Each sound felt like a hammer striking Sylvia's heart. Darcy picked up the phone. "Hello, yeah, I know, she doesn't seem to be in the lounge. Maybe she went somewhere else. I'll be right there." The sound of footsteps gradually faded away along with the voice. Only when she was sure Darcy had really left did Sylvia collapse as if all strength had been drained from her, her limbs going limp. Harlan leaned back in his chair, watching her calmly, taking in every movement and expression she made. Her flustered appearance was like a needle, sharply piercing his heart. "So afraid he'll find out." Harlan, his eyes suddenly darkened, his voice carrying a chill. "So, you're unwilling to call off the engagement because you still have feelings for him?" Sylvia subconsciously denied, "I don't," but she quickly realized, "Harlan, how did you know I used to like him?" She did indeed have feelings for Darcy, but that 4-year-long secret crush ended during her sophomore year of high school. At that time, Darcy was a junior in college, yet he had already received an offer for a master's program from a prestigious foreign university and was about to study abroad in the UK. Meanwhile, encouraged by her best friend, she mustered the courage to confess her feelings. Several pages were filled with her youthful emotions and inner monologues, pouring out her heart. In moments of deep emotion, there were even traces of tears smudging the ink. But the confession letter she thought was touching was torn in half and thrown into the trash the next day, the light pink envelope she had carefully chosen now covered in mud stains, just like her heart, crushed into the dust. It must have been utter disgust that made Darcy, who was always humble and polite to everyone, act so ungentlemanly for the first time. So, she chose to make a graceful exit. But this crush that was nipped in the bud was only known to my best friend Nancy and the person involved, Darcy. No one else knew. So how did Harlan know about it, even if he had been monitoring her phone after they got together? By that time she and Darcy had long lost contact. Sylvia looked up at him. I only met you after starting university, so how could you possibly know that I had liked him? Her candid admission of having liked Darcy was like a thorn stuck in Harlan's throat, not particularly painful, yet impossible to ignore. Liked, he repeated in a low voice, as if tasting the bitterest poison in the world. Then, he abruptly grabbed the back of her neck and pulled her close, his voice cold as ice. And now, do you still like him? Sylvia was frozen by the raw, devouring madness in his eyes. She struggled to pull back, but his iron-like grip held her firmly in place. Answer me. Sylvia had no doubt that if she dared to give an affirmative answer, he would snap her neck in the next second. She opened her mouth to speak, but the lights suddenly turned on. Immediately, Harlan's phone began to ring. Harlan pulled out his phone to answer the call, and his brother's voice immediately came through the receiver. Harlan, did that old fox notice something? Otherwise, why would the power just happen to go out right when the video was playing? What a coincidence. And my buddy in the backstage has disappeared. Should we keep playing the video? Harlan didn't answer his question, but instead raised an eyebrow and asked Sylvia, Sis, what do you think? Should we keep playing the video? Perhaps because she was mentally prepared. Sylvia was no longer panicked as before and had instead calmed down. Rather than being threatened by him exploiting her weaknesses, she would break the threat first. It's the 21st century. If there are still people slut-shaming the victim, that's the tragedy of the times, not hers. Do whatever you want, Harlan, Sylvia said coldly, looking at him. I don't care about this. Harlan lowered his head and chuckled, then leaned in to whisper. What if this USB drive contains the evidence of your father killing my dad in that car accident back then? Harlan gently stroked her cheek with his thumb, carrying a hint of inappropriate intimacy. Sister, I told you. I never intended to use your privacy to threaten anyone. Sister belongs to me. How could I bear to let others see my treasure? But now, I want you to make a choice. Break off the engagement with Darcy and return to me, so we can be like before, or I'll make the evidence public. Sylvia struggled to avoid him, gritting her teeth as she said, Harlan, are you threatening me? Harlan let out a low chuckle, neither confirming nor denying. He leaned down, his nose lightly brushing against hers. Close yet not quite touching. This isn't a threat, it's a request, he whispered. You won't let me down, will you, sister? After a long standoff, Sylvia nodded. Fine, I'll make things clear with Darcy. Harlan hadn't even fully formed his smile when he heard her add, but not now. The alliance between two families is not a child's game. You must give me some time to arrange everything. Isn't that right? Harlan looked at her for a few seconds, his gaze deep, as if trying to see into the depths of her soul. Finally, he nodded. I hope my sister won't make me wait too long. You know, I've never been a patient person. Sylvia couldn't help but sneer coldly. He had far too much patience otherwise. How could he have lain low for 4 years at Eugene's house? Before she could say anything, footsteps echoed in the corridor again. Darcy, who hadn't found the person he was looking for, had turned back. Sylvia frantically tried to get off Harlan's lap, but the moment she stood up, she was pulled right back down. Her body uncontrollably fell back into Harlan's embrace, her chest inadvertently brushing past the tip of his nose. Sylvia could no longer hold back her suppressed anger, lowering her head to bite down hard on his shoulder. Harlan didn't make a sound as if he couldn't feel the pain, silently pressing her even tighter against his chest, deeply inhaling the familiar sweet scent from her neck, his expression full of attachment. Only when the taste of blood filled her mouth did Sylvia release her bite, growling viciously in his ear. Is it fun to play with me? Do you have to make this known to everyone? Then, before she could finish speaking, the hand restraining her waist loosened. The moment the door was pushed open, Sylvia instinctively pushed Harlan away with force, only to land hard on the ground. Harlan and Darcy simultaneously stepped forward to stand in front of her, their concerned voices overlapping. Are you okay? Sylvia looked at the two hands extended toward her and without hesitation placed her hand into Darcy's palm. Darcy gently exerted a little strength, helping her up softly, and asked in a tender voice, Are you okay? Sylvia shook her head. It's nothing, I just tripped. Harlan darkened his gaze and withdrew his hand that had frozen mid-air. Darcy finally noticed Harlan beside her and greeted him politely. "You must be Harlan, I've heard Uncle Jiang mention you." "Pleased to meet you." Harlan kept his hands in his pockets, glanced coldly at the outstretched hand, and said nothing. Sylvia quickly smoothed things over. "That's just his personality, he's quite introverted. He'll warm up once you get to know him better. Please don't take it personally." Darcy smiled and said, "No worries. It seems I'll have to put more effort into building a good relationship with my future brother-in-law then." His use of the term brother-in-law made Harlan's expression turn even colder. Just as a sarcastic remark was about to leave his lips, Sylvia interrupted. "I've rested enough. Let's head out now." "All right. Perfect timing to introduce you to a couple of friends. By the way, where did you go earlier?" "I went to the restroom, and suddenly the power went out. I didn't bring my phone, so I couldn't see the way, so I just waited in the restroom for a while." The voices of the two gradually faded into the distance. Harlan watched their retreating figures walking side by side and suddenly remembered what those people in the hall had said about them being a perfect match. It felt like a lump was stuck in his chest, swelling until it seemed about to explode. Bang! The window glass suddenly shattered in response, shards embedding into the back of his fist. A few drops of blood seeped from the wounds on his hand, but he didn't even notice. His chest heaving violently, after his emotions had settled, he casually wiped the blood from his hands and walked out. He found a corner to lazily sit down, his gaze wandering as he followed the two figures on the field. It seemed as if everything had returned to the starting point, the dazzling, perfect princess and prince, and the rat in the gutter coveting the princess, overestimating its own abilities. But the mouse took 8 years to reach the princess. So how could he easily let go of her hand? Harlan threw back his head and drained the glass in one gulp, then stood up and walked out. When that persistently scorching gaze that had been fixed on her finally disappeared, Sylvia unconsciously let out a sigh of relief. She found an excuse to take a breather in the corridor, and before long, Nancy came looking for her. "You really know how to pick a hiding spot, don't you? I've been searching for ages. Your advisor couldn't reach you. So she called me instead." Sylvia paused for a moment, then asked, "I left my phone at the stylist's. What did my advisor want?" "She said the overseas exchange research program you applied for has been approved. The foreign professor is very interested in your research topic and wants you to report directly to the school next week." Sylvia widened her eyes in disbelief. Overjoyed, she quickly came to her senses and grabbed Nancy's arm, saying, "Please keep this matter confidential for now." Nancy thought she probably wanted to give her family a surprise, so she agreed without hesitation. After the banquet ended, Darcy drove Sylvia home. Sylvia thought it over and still told him the news. Darcy expressed his support and agreed to wait until she completed her studies before getting married. Sylvia finally felt relieved. She hasn't figured out what to do yet. The news of the marriage alliance between the two families has just been announced. If she calls off the engagement now, it would undoubtedly embarrass both families, especially since it was the Eugene family who proposed the alliance. Compared to the Giles family, the Eugene family is the one benefiting more from this marriage alliance. She can't go back on her word. But when it comes to Harlan, she doesn't dare take the risk. Just as well, she might as well take this opportunity to go abroad for a couple of years to let things cool down. Time is enough to change many things, perhaps in 2 years. Harlan wouldn't be staring at her so intently, and he might also come to see his father's kindness toward him. She had a feeling that Harlan's attitude toward his father might not be as irreconcilable as she had imagined. Sylvia was lost in thought and didn't even notice when the car stopped. It wasn't until she heard Darcy's voice that she snapped out of it. "Sorry, what did you just say? I didn't catch that." Darcy looked at her and suddenly laughed. "Sylvia, are you planning to be this polite with me all the time? No need to be reserved, just interact with me like you used to." What was it like before? She really wanted to ask, but in the end, she didn't. Back then, he mercilessly tore up her confession letter, and along with it, the young girl's self-esteem. It wasn't because of his rejection, but because Darcy treated everyone with kindness, even when faced with confessions from girls he didn't like. He would patiently listen to their words before respectfully turning them down. He cherished everyone's feelings, but trampled hers into the dust. As a result, during her sensitive adolescence, she fell into a long period of self-doubt. Sylvia didn't say anything more. Just as she unfastened her seatbelt and was about to get out of the car, Darcy suddenly grabbed her arm and handed her a gift box. An engagement gift. Sylvia took it and thanked him politely. "Thank you, but it was such short notice. I didn't consider this. Can I give you one later?" "Then tomorrow it is." Sylvia was a bit slow to react, instinctively asking, "What, didn't you want to make up a gift for me?" Darcy chuckled softly, his tone inexplicably carrying a hint of indulgence. "Mind bringing the person himself along to pick it out?" Sylvia was momentarily stunned. Somewhat surprised that he would make such a request, but she agreed nonetheless. She got out of the car and went home, placing the gift box on the table before heading to the bathroom. Before going to bed, she walked to the door and locked it. She never used to lock the door before. When she was young, she worried that her little sister would wake up in the middle of the night crying and looking for her. Later on, it was because Harlan liked to sneak in at night and hold her while falling asleep. She had grown accustomed to leaving the door unlocked for them. Now that she thought about it, this was the first time in years that she had locked the door. Sylvia sneered and lay down on the bed. The exhaustion from the past few days washed over her like a returning tide, and she quickly fell into a deep sleep. In her dazed state, a scorching breath fell on her neck. The next second, warm, soft lips pressed against hers, lingering and caressing. The cool, damp sensation completely roused the drowsy Sylvia. Her body stiffened, and she instinctively pushed away the person pressing down on her, her voice urgent and resistant. "Harlan, what? Now that you have a fiancé, I can't touch you anymore." His lips brushed against her earlobe as if by accident, his voice laced with a malicious teasing. "Get out." Sylvia turned her head away, her voice low but sharp, her chest heaving with shock and anger. He chuckled softly, his hot breath fanning over her ear, sending a shiver down her spine. "What if I say no?" Sylvia struggled violently, trying to break free from his restraint, but her legs were tightly entangled and pinned down by his long limbs. "Harlan, don't do this." "Do what?" He pressed close to her ear, his breath scorching, using that tone she once thought was innocent and harmless to utter the most outrageous words. "Does Darcy know about us?" Before the words fully faded, his fingers, forceful yet gentle, turned her face toward him. He leaned down and sealed her lips with his own. Sylvia widened her eyes abruptly, her sobs completely swallowed. His tongue pried open her tightly shut teeth, delving in with a blend of tenderness and dominance, licking every sensitive spot. Mimicking the rhythm of the most intimate entanglement, Sylvia clenched her fists and pounded his shoulders, her nails even unconsciously digging into the taut muscles of his arms. But he only grunted softly, holding her even tighter, kissing her more deeply. The air grew thin and scorching, her consciousness ebbed and flowed, and deep within her body, a shameful, unfamiliar tremor arose. As the kiss paused, a wanton silver thread stretched between their lips. He drew back slightly, his forehead pressed against hers, breathing heavily, yet his gaze remained fixed on her dazed eyes and swollen lips. "Sister's refusal," he murmured, his thumb gently stroking her moist lip corner, his voice hoarse beyond recognition, "is not the least bit serious." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly fell silent, the grip on his hand loosened slightly. He raised his hand, his cool fingertips brushing past the corner of her eye, wiping away the wet trace. Then he let out a cold laugh. "I'll only give you 1 week. If you can't handle your relationship with Darcy, then I'll handle it myself." After saying this, he released her, stood up, and turned to leave the room. Sylvia stared at the wide-open balcony door, her aggrieved expression cooling. She casually wiped her face, stood up, and slammed the door shut with a bang, locking it in one fluid motion. The next day, Sylvia and Darcy went to the mall. She stood in front of the men's counter browsing, picked up a dark blue tie, and instinctively glanced sideways at Darcy, asking, "What do you think of this one?" Darcy smiled. "I like anything you pick. Could you help me try it on? I'd like to see how it looks." Perhaps his tone was too natural and calm. Sylvia didn't think much of it and replied frankly, "All right, bend down a little." Darcy obediently leaned forward slightly. Sylvia, holding the tie, stood on her tiptoes to loop it around his collar, her fingers deftly tying the knot and adjusting the length. Her expression was focused, with her usual slight curve at the corner of her mouth. Darcy's hand involuntarily lifted, only to stop half an inch away from her waist. "Is this all right?" Sylvia finished tying the tie and stepped back to examine it, but her gaze unexpectedly collided with his intense stare. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat, warmth quietly creeping up to the tips of her ears. "Perfect." Darcy didn't hesitate to praise. "You're quite skilled at this." Sylvia smiled. "I've tied it many times for my dad before. It seems I'll be blessed in the future." Sylvia unconsciously averted her gaze, failing to notice the smiling eyes behind the lenses. After shopping at the mall, the two went to an open-air restaurant for dinner together. At the dining table, Darcy asked her with a smile if she liked the gift he gave her. Sylvia paused for a moment, remembering the gift she was too tired to open last night, and vaguely replied, "I like it." After saying that, she guiltily gulped down the wine in her glass. Darcy saw right through it but didn't expose her, only smiling as he reminded, "Drink less. You don't handle alcohol well." Sylvia was somewhat unconvinced. That was before. People change. After she spoke, Darcy's smile froze for a moment before he chuckled in agreement. True, so, let me get to know the current Sylvia again. An intense, lingering emotion flashed in his eyes. So fleeting it seemed like an illusion. Sylvia withdrew her gaze, silently chiding herself for having drunk too much. It turned out her alcohol tolerance wasn't particularly good. She started feeling dizzy after just a few drinks. Fortunately, she behaved well when drunk, falling asleep as soon as she got in the car. Darcy reached out and half embraced her slumped body against the car door. Sylvia unconsciously found a comfortable position in his embrace and slept all the way to the doorstep without waking up. The assistant, looking through the rearview mirror, saw his boss sitting silently in the car with no intention of waking the person up, so he quietly got out to buy a pack of cigarettes. The car door closed, isolating a tranquil space. Darcy had no intention of doing anything. I just want to stay quietly with her like this for a while. But the strands of her hair scattered across his neck stirred a tickling sensation, like the thoughts that had lingered in his heart all these years but were never spoken aloud. His nostrils were filled with the sweet fragrance emanating from her, and he could hear his own deafening heartbeat, like strings gradually snapping one by one. Darcy's eyes darkened abruptly as he slowly leaned down, approaching those lips he had fantasized about countless times in his dreams. Just as they were about to touch, bang, a deafening roar shattered the night sky, the massive impact violently shoving both of their bodies forward. Darcy immediately shielded Sylvia with his entire body. His arms tightly encircling her in his embrace, Sylvia's forehead collided with his collarbone, and she let out a soft, muffled groan. Darcy soothingly stroked her head and comforted her, saying, "It's all right, don't be afraid." The blinding high beams suddenly pierced through the rear window, flooding the car's interior with a stark, bright light. Against the backlight, a tall and slender figure stepped out of the black sports car that had rear-ended them. Walking straight to the door and reaching out to pull it open, the door was locked. Harlan remained motionless. Through the window, Darcy could clearly see his tense jawline and the fierce, turbulent intensity in his eyes. He raised his hand, curled his fingers, and knocked forcefully twice on the car window. Before Darcy could react, Sylvia slowly lifted her head from his embrace. Her gaze was initially hazy with drunkenness, but the moment she saw the face outside the car window, seething with suppressed rage, she instantly sobered up, her pupils contracting sharply. Harlan stopped knocking. He took half a step back, removed his wristwatch and tossed it aside, then rolled up his sleeves, his eyes fixed intently on Darcy. His gaze was as cold as venom, and in the next second, his clenched fist smashed violently against the car window. "No!" Sylvia let out a gasp. Darcy tightened his arms abruptly, shielding her completely in his embrace. The sound of shattering glass pierced the air sharply, like the complete shattering of the masks between the three of them. Amid the flying shards, Harlan unlocked and pulled open the car door, his blood-stained hand precisely grabbing Sylvia's wrist. Meanwhile, Darcy still maintained his protective stance, holding her tightly in his arms. The air suddenly froze. Sylvia, before Harlan could speak, gently broke free from Darcy's embrace and whispered, "I'll explain this to you later." With that, without waiting for Darcy to react, she followed Harlan's lead and got out of the car. The assistant, who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion, was about to step forward to intervene but was stopped by Darcy's sharp glance. After the person had walked far away, the assistant opened the car door and got in. "Mr. Darcy, MS, Sylvia's stepbrother seems to be looking at her strangely." Darcy responded indifferently with an and asked, "How are the negotiations for the West City project going?" Everything was settled originally, but just before signing, a competitor appeared. "They voluntarily offered to give up 30% of their profits on our terms." It doesn't even feel like a business negotiation anymore, more like they're deliberately targeting the Giles family. "I'll give you an additional 10% discount on his terms." As soon as the words were spoken, the assistant's expression changed abruptly, and his voice shifted in tone. "Mr. Darcy, the value of the West City project is far from worth that price. The other party has already given a 30% discount with no profit left. If we give any more discount..." Darcy cut him off with a laugh. "Don't worry, someone will naturally foot the bill. After all, a rat from the gutter, once it turns its life around, is eager to prove itself. He would make him see himself clearly, send him back to where he came from, with no chance of ever turning things around again." Sylvia was pulled so hard by Harlan that she stumbled, instinctively grabbing his arm. She cried out, "Harlan, slow down a bit. Can we just talk outside?" Harlan turned a deaf ear, striding swiftly as he dragged her into the villa, the front door slamming against the wall with a loud bang. Sylvia's heart leaped into her throat. She had braced herself to be discovered by Mr. Eugene, but inexplicably felt a wave of relief upon seeing the empty villa. Only when she relaxed did she notice Harlan's hand, the wound gruesomely gaping and dripping blood, leaving a trail of crimson in his wake, yet he seemed oblivious to the pain, gripping her wrist so tightly it felt as though her bones might shatter. "You're bleeding," Sylvia exclaimed, one hand gripping his tense forearm, her fingertips cold. "Let go first, I'll get the first aid kit. This needs immediate treatment." The madness in the man's eyes froze for a moment. As if struck by this sudden concern, his grip on her hand unconsciously loosening slightly, Sylvia immediately withdrew her hand and turned to quickly fetch the first aid kit. She knelt beside him, gently cradling his injured hand, carefully cleaning the blood around the wound with a cotton swab dipped in saline solution. "Does it hurt?" She looked up, her gaze soft yet reproachful. "Don't do things that hurt yourself like this again." Harlan stared at her, his gaze greedily capturing every bit of her feigned tenderness in this moment. He knew it was like drinking poison to quench thirst, yet he savored it as if it were sweet nectar. The violent emotions receded like a tide, fading away from where her fingers touched, replaced by a deeper, morbidly satisfying tranquility. "Continue." He leaned in, his forehead pressing against hers, their breaths intertwining scorchingly. "Don't stop." Sylvia obediently continued with her movements. After finishing the bandaging, she lifted her head, her eyelashes fluttering slightly. "All done. Try not to get it wet these next few days. I'll talk to Darcy as soon as possible. So don't be angry anymore. Get some rest. I'll go get you a glass of water." He didn't stop her, his gaze still fixed on Sylvia, his eyes filled with an intense, lingering desire. Sylvia turned and walked toward the break room. The moment her back was to him, she quickly pulled a pill from her pocket. Her fingers trembling slightly, yet accurately dropping it into the cup, the pill dissolved quickly, silently. She walked back holding that cup of water, brought it to his lips, and he almost without hesitation drank from her hand, tilting his head back to drain the cup in one go. He drank so decisively, as if what she offered was a deadly poison, and he would still drink it with a smile. The cup was emptied. Sylvia and the tightly wound string in her heart loosened almost imperceptibly. The effects of the medicine took hold quickly. His gaze grew increasingly hazy, yet he stubbornly kept his eyes fixed on her, as if trying to etch the image of her in this moment deep into his soul. "Don't go." His voice was already thick with drowsiness, his body unconsciously leaning toward her. "Sleep. I'll stay here with you." Sylvia caught his collapsing body and settled him against the sofa. His breathing soon grew long and heavy, the sharp lines of his brows and eyes finally relaxing completely in sleep, revealing an unexpectedly vulnerable defenselessness. Sylvia withdrew her hand, turned, and hurried upstairs to pack her luggage. Before leaving, she remembered the gift Darcy had mentioned and instinctively wanted to pack it in her suitcase, but couldn't find it anywhere. Seeing the family photo on the table, she casually packed it into her suitcase, but in her haste, she knocked over the crystal ball placed on the table. Bang! The crystal ball instantly shattered into pieces, and from the broken gap in the base, a faint metallic glimmer caught her eye. She instinctively crouched down to clean up the mess, but her hand froze mid-air. That was not a part the crystal ball should have, but rather, pinhole camera. This realization made Sylvia's mind go completely blank, her scalp tingling with numbness. This crystal ball was a birthday gift Harlan gave her the year they first met. He said he thought she was as pure and dazzling as the princess inside the crystal ball, and he was destined to be the princess's knight. At the time, she had teased him for using such a cliché pickup line despite his young age. The next second, the crystal ball sounded with Harlan's voice, deep and magnetic, singing a lullaby. He said this was her exclusive lullaby, saying he hoped this music would accompany her every night. So, this is how it accompanied her. It turned out, it wasn't from a certain moment, but from the very beginning. All these years, everything about her in this room, her laughter, her tears, her secrets, her vulnerabilities, all of it was laid bare before him, with nowhere to hide. A chill that went deep into her bones crept up her spine, making her scalp tingle. Her stomach churned violently, and she felt on the verge of vomiting. "No, I have to leave, now, right away. Every second longer here suffocates her." Sylvia could no longer care about anything else. She abruptly stood up, haphazardly stuffed a few scattered necessities into her suitcase, and snapped the lock shut with a click. She yanked the door open violently. She ran straight into Harlan's dark, brooding eyes. Sylvia's heart suddenly tightened, and all the muscles in her body tensed up. Harlan stood outside the door, the corner of his mouth curling into a sickly, controlling smile she had never seen before. "Where are you going, sister?" He leaned in close, his breath against her ear like a snake's flickering tongue, making her limbs go numb. Didn't you say you'd stay with me? Span, her mind raced frantically, searching for a reasonable excuse. The school is organizing a charity sale recently, and I want to donate these unused items. Really? His gaze lingered on her face for a few seconds, so profound that it made her heart flutter, as if it could pierce through her clumsy lie and reach the deepest fear in her heart. Sister is still so kind-hearted. Does sister know that whenever sister lies, she always avoids looking into my eyes? Before the words had even finished, a pungent odor invaded her senses. Sylvia's body went limp and collapsed into a cold embrace, leaving only a chilling voice in her ears. Sister. Since you don't want to stay by my side, then don't go anywhere. When her consciousness returned, what met her eyes was a completely unfamiliar environment, with heavy dark curtains tightly blocking all possible sources of light. This was a luxurious cage hidden deep in the mountains, tailor-made for Sylvia. The thought of escape grew wildly like weeds. She had tried. One afternoon, Harlan seemed to let his guard down. She pried open the window latch and threw herself desperately into the dense forest. Thorns tore her skin, gravel embedded itself in the soles of her feet. Then, she stumbled headlong into Harlan's already open embrace. He stood there as if he had been waiting for a long time, with no trace of surprise on his face. Only a deep, chilling calm. Sister, you never learned to behave. His sigh was as light as a feather, yet carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. That night, her resistance and cries were all swallowed by him. Humiliation and anger surged in her heart. Sylvia struggled to turn her face away, her voice turning cold but unable to conceal a trace of embarrassment. Harlan, don't make me hate you. Upon hearing this, he seemed to find her words amusing. He chuckled softly and leaned in again, his nose brushing against the tears on her face. Then hate me. His voice was like a demon's whisper, carrying a determined gentleness. After all, you've never truly seen the real me in your eyes. After saying this, he gave her no chance to react, once again sealing her lips, turning all protests and struggles into a deeper, more profound dissent. The punishing intimacy left both of them in discomfort. She was in pain, and so was he, yet he still found relentless pleasure in it. In the struggle, Sylvia knocked into the lamp on the bedside table. Without a second thought, she grabbed it and, mustering all her strength, smashed it against Harlan's head. Harlan grunted, his movements halting as warm blood dripped onto the side of her neck. He looked at her, a flicker of astonishment in his eyes, but it was soon replaced by a deeper, more twisted excitement. He chuckled softly, licking the blood from the corner of his lips. My little wildcat, your claws are quite sharp. Afterward, he didn't bother to tend to the wound, merely wiping away the blood with his fingertips before pulling her close and falling asleep. And she, in her extreme exhaustion and fear, also fell into a deep slumber. After an unknown amount of time, Sylvia faintly heard a series of miserable, sorrowful wails, ethereal and intermittent. It felt like a dream, yet it carried a bone-chilling agony. She jolted awake, her heart pounding wildly. The room was deathly silent, with only Harlan's steady breathing. That wailing vanished, as if it were just her hallucination, but in the air, there still seemed to linger a faint, elusive trace of the scent of blood. As if guided by some unseen force, she gently moved Harlan's arm from her waist and, barefoot, followed the direction of the sound she remembered. Moving through the dimly lit corridor, the villa was astonishingly large, with a structure as complex as a maze. She pushed open one after another of the half-closed doors, revealing mostly empty rooms covered with white sheets. It wasn't until she pushed open the door at the very end of the corridor that the sight before her made the blood in her veins freeze instantly. 3 entire walls were densely covered with her photos, ponytailed, in school uniforms, side profiles while reading with heads bowed, backs turned while laughing and chatting with friends. Not just photos. The glass display cases placed against the wall, with the items exhibited inside, made her scalp tingle even more. The strawberry hair tie she lost, the pen she used, the missing school uniform jacket and umbrella, and that confession letter torn in half. All the old items she thought had long been submerged in the river of time were lying here intact, like exhibits in a museum, meticulously cleaned and carefully preserved. A profound fear of being stripped bare, examined, and having her entire life thoroughly spied on spread from the depths of her heart. She hadn't been watched for just 4 years, but from a very, very long time ago, she had already been within his sight. This venomous snake had long been lurking around her life, silently flicking its tongue. An extreme chill shot from the soles of her feet to the top of her head, and she couldn't control her trembling, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. She unconsciously took a step back, her back suddenly hitting the heavy sandalwood table, knocking the box on it to the ground. Sylvia instinctively looked over. Was the engagement gift Darcy had given her. It turned out it had also been stolen by Harlan. Sylvia opened the box. Inside lay a hand-drawn card that had been torn apart and then glued back together. The card featured cartoon portraits of her and Darcy, but now Darcy's cartoon portrait and the writing below it had been slashed with a knife. This hand-drawn card was made by her when she was 14 years old. That year, she gave this wish card to Darcy as a birthday gift, promising that no matter what wish he made, she would help him fulfill it. Back then, he just tucked the wish card into his pocket, smiling and saying that in the future, he would come to her with the card to redeem his wish. And now, Darcy has come to her with this card to redeem his wish. Sylvia was a bit surprised. She hadn't expected that even after 10 years had passed, Darcy still remembered and had even kept this card. Sylvia was curious about what he had written. So she leaned in to carefully read the handwriting on it. It said, "Sylvia, marrying you was a wish I made long ago, and I've been waiting for you to grow up. But later, when you grew up, you found someone you liked more, and for his sake, you refused to marry me. As long as you are happy, I am willing to step aside. Span, but he has hurt you time and again, so I'm going to take my treasure back. Sylvia, let's not be a marriage of convenience, okay? I hope you can try to accept me. I'm confident that I can make you fall in love with the current Darcy again. Sincerely, the 19-year-old Darcy." The card slipped from Sylvia's hand. It turned out that the boy she secretly liked back then had also secretly liked her. "Do you like it? The surprise I prepared for you?" A voice so gentle it was chilling quietly sounded from behind. Sylvia swung around abruptly. Harlan stood there at some point, leaning against the doorframe, the dark red scar on his temple resembling a watching eye in the dim light. In that instant, she felt as if a cold, slimy venomous snake had tightly coiled around her neck, making it impossible to breathe. "Back then, the confession letter I secretly put in Darcy's backpack, you were the one who threw it away, and you deliberately made sure I saw it, didn't you?" Harlan stated bluntly. "Yes. When did it start? Why do I have no memory of you at all, logically speaking?" Harlan with his looks would absolutely be the object of female admiration even on campus. If she had really seen him before, how could she possibly have no impression of him at all? Harlan let out a low chuckle upon hearing this. "It's normal that you don't remember. After all, no one remembers the rat in the gutter." So, he didn't blame her. Not only did he not blame her, he was even grateful that her memories began with that clear and pure young boy. After all, he too detested the broken and shattered person he once was. That dilapidated house, perpetually filled with the smell of mold and alcohol, was Harlan's entire perception of home. His father indulged in drinking, whoring, and gambling. Losing money meant beating his mother, and having no money meant beating her too. If he tried to intervene, he would get beaten along with her. After his mother couldn't take it anymore and ran away, those fists spared no effort and all landed on him. Jinx. Wretched bastard. Just like your mother. These curses became Harlan's endless background noise throughout his childhood. The mottled stains on the walls were either from alcohol or blood. The shame and filth from his family were soon brought to school, and everyone looked at him as if he were a pile of filth that needed to be avoided. His backpack would be thrown into the stinky ditch, his seat would be smeared with sticky glue, and even just passing by the playground would get him dragged into the restroom and beaten up. All the malicious targeting stopped after Harlan beat a classmate so badly they ended up in the hospital. But the thousands in medical bills nearly got Harlan beaten to death by his father. "You're just a worthless piece of trash. If someone hits you, you take it." Later, he grew increasingly silent and numb, like a cold stone, until that rainy day. Harlan fought back against his father for the first time, but his chronically undernourished body was no match. He was driven out of the house, his face bruised and swollen. The wound was soaked white by the rain, its edges red, swollen, and turned outward, burning with a fiery pain. Harlan huddled beside a pile of discarded wooden crates at the mouth of the alley, shivering so hard his teeth chattered. In his dazed state, he even thought that perhaps dying like this would be a kind of relief. Until a warm shadow fell over him. In the hazy curtain of rain, Harlan saw a face, very clean, like white jade washed by the rain, with a pair of clear eyes looking at him, devoid of the familiar disgust, fear, or pity he was used to. The girl was holding a sky-blue umbrella, quietly holding it over his head, shielding him from the cold, grey gloom. She didn't say anything, just looked at him for a moment. Then took a school uniform jacket and a pink umbrella from her backpack and gently placed them on the drier wooden crate beside him. After doing all this, she turned and walked away into the rain. Harlan stared blankly for a long time before tremblingly reaching out and putting on the coat. It was a bit small, but warm, carrying a faint, lingering fragrance. At that moment, something fiercely struck the long-frozen, lifeless depths of his heart. From then on, Harlan began unconsciously searching for the girl's figure in the crowd. He knew her name, her class, which route she usually took home, and which window in the hallway she liked to chat and laugh with her friends during breaks. After school, Harlan would follow her from a distance, watching her wave goodbye to her friends and walk through that gate, which to Harlan felt like a door to another world. He was like a rat in the gutter, daring only to hide in the shadows, greedily and secretly absorbing the occasional drops of light that spilled from her. He didn't dare approach, didn't dare speak, afraid that the filth and darkness clinging to him would taint that purity. This silent, persistent gaze gradually soured amidst distorted growth and morbid dependence. He couldn't let go, wouldn't let go even in death, so he wanted to hide this beam of light away. She was his, could only be his, no one was allowed to defile her. Harlan snapped back to reality and walked over to Sylvia, his gaze lingering on her face with an almost devout infatuation and a barely perceptible plea. "Sister, let's forget the past, okay, let's start over." When his scorching fingertips touched Sylvia's cheek, it made her tremble involuntarily. "Harlan, you have a fever," he let out a low, indifferent in response. "You should go rest, stay with me, please." Harlan buried his head in the crook of her neck, nuzzling gently, his voice hoarse. "As long as you don't leave me, I'll listen to anything you say." Sylvia paused slightly, lowering her eyelashes. "First, go back to your room and rest properly." As soon as the words fell, Sylvia was suddenly pulled into a scorching embrace, so hot it startled her. Harlan carried her back to the room and, before he knew it, fell into a deep sleep. Sylvia was about to fetch a basin of cold water when the agonizing wails faintly echoed again. As if emerging from deep underground, she followed the sound to a basement, where the cries came through the iron door more clearly. Sylvia instinctively glanced inside. Before she could make out anything clearly, a thing crawling on the ground suddenly scurried toward her. Sylvia stumbled backward in terror, clamping a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Only when their eyes met did Sylvia realize the figure crumpled on the ground was human. He lay collapsed in a filthy pool of blood and waste, his body covered in whip marks. Below the waist, there was nothing but two jagged stumps of severed limbs, exposing stark white bone fragments, dragging two sticky trails of blood across the ground. Her stomach churned violently, and Sylvia couldn't suppress a retch, breaking out in a cold sweat all over. The man was frantically banging his head against the iron door, emitting muffled, guttural sounds like those of a deaf mute, his murky eyes filled with a twisted hint of excitement. It wasn't until she saw the scar at the corner of his mouth that Sylvia suddenly realized the person before her was Mark. Her blood ran cold, and the overwhelming shock made Sylvia tremble uncontrollably. She looked at the man on the ground, dragging his broken body as if he had been pulled from a pool of blood, and simply couldn't connect him to the arrogant and domineering gang leader from her memory. Mark babbled and whimpered, suddenly pushing a gun out with his head, his eyes seeming to plead with her to end his life. Suddenly, bang, a deafening blast erupted without warning. A few drops of thick, warm liquid splattered violently onto Sylvia's face. A scorching breath abruptly pressed against the back of her neck. A voice so gentle it was chilling quietly sounded from behind. "Sister, why have you run off to such a filthy place?" Sylvia snapped back to reality and couldn't help but scream in furious rage. "Harlan, have you lost your mind? Do you have any idea what you're doing? This is murder, murder." Harlan paid no mind, gently wiping away the bloodstains and the tears that had unknowingly spilled from her face, saying softly, "Don't be afraid, it's just a beast. Those who have hurt my sister must die." Sylvia froze completely in place. She couldn't remember how she made her way out of that dungeon, only that she developed a high fever that very night, after several days of continuous fever with no signs of breaking. Harlan had no choice but to summon a private doctor. To avoid exposing their location, Harlan hadn't hired any servants and had to handle everything personally. While Harlan was seeing the doctor down the mountain, Sylvia yanked out her 4-needle and ran toward the back hills. She still held the car key tightly in her hand, the one the doctor had secretly slipped into her sleeve while giving her an 4. After running for what felt like an eternity, she finally spotted the black SUV hidden behind the tree trunks. Sylvia didn't hesitate to rush into the car, stomping the accelerator to the floor as the vehicle sped along the narrow path. Just as she was about to merge onto the main road, two blinding white lights from behind closed in at an alarming speed. Bang! The impact came from the rear of the car, causing it to spin out of control and crash into a tree trunk before finally coming to a halt. Sylvia collapsed over the steering wheel, gasping for breath, her thin pajamas soaked through with cold sweat. Harlan got out of the car, walked around to the passenger side, and roughly dragged out the pale-faced doctor, pressing the dark muzzle of his gun firmly against the man's temple. "Get out, Harlan stared at her expressionlessly, his voice as calm as if he were making an invitation. Sylvia pushed the car door open, her legs so weak she could barely stand. The night wind whipped up her thin nightgown, the cold biting to the bone. "Do you like this kind of self-righteous mercy from him?" Harlan's voice was as cold as ice. "Tell me, how should I repay him?" "Harlan, let him go." Sylvia suddenly pulled out the gun she had secretly hidden from her coat, trembling as she pointed it at him. The gun wasn't particularly heavy, but her hands shook violently as she held it with both hands. Harlan obviously froze for a moment, then raised an eyebrow slightly, as if witnessing something both incredibly amusing and utterly absurd. "Do you know how to use it, sister?" He approached step by step. Sylvia's hands trembled violently, the gun muzzle shaking wildly in front of Harlan's chest. "Don't come any closer," Sylvia screamed, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. Harlan paid no attention, walking straight up to Sylvia and reaching out to wrap his hands around Sylvia's trembling ones. With immense patience, he guided Sylvia's index finger to find that small metal piece. A soft click sounded. He helped her release the safety catch. Then, Harlan steadily held Sylvia's hand, pressing the dark gun muzzle precisely against his own heart. "Come." Harlan gazed into Sylvia's tear-blurred eyes, his voice low like a lover's whisper, carrying a deadly allure. "Shoot, or stay with me forever." His eyes were so deep, so heavy, swirling with a madness Sylvia couldn't comprehend and an almost devout stubbornness. The world narrowed to the steady heartbeat from his chest, transmitting through the gun barrel to vibrate against Sylvia's fingertips. Struggle, pain, fear, long-term repression, and the extreme confrontation at this moment tore at Sylvia's nerves. It was squeezed out from Sylvia's throat. Fingers abruptly pulled the trigger. Bang! The gunshot exploded, startling the birds in the forest. Warm liquid gushed out along Harlan's shoulder. He looked at the confusion and pain on Sylvia's face, his smile deepening. "Sister can't bear to." Before the words fully left his mouth, another gunshot rang out. Harlan's body shook violently. This time, it had struck his heart. Harlan looked up at Sylvia, his face showing a relieved, even strangely satisfied smile. His blood-stained fingers lifted, wanting to gently touch her cheek, but ultimately fell heavily. At the same time, the piercing sound of police sirens grew closer, and several car headlights illuminated the entire forest as bright as day. Darcy rushed out of the car and pulled Sylvia into his arms, with hurried footsteps following behind. Sylvia, her mind went blank, her entire body chilled to the bone. Did she kill someone? She killed Harlan. Sylvia stared blankly at her blood-stained hands. Chaos, resuscitation, statements. The world seemed to have turned into a blur of colors. Sylvia was pushed along like a wandering spirit. Harlan was ultimately saved, the bullet having missed his heart by a hair's breadth, but he never woke up again, becoming a vegetable dependent on machines to sustain his life. Sylvia visited him once. He closed his eyes, his face calm, even serene, as if he had simply sunk into a long dream from which he did not wish to wake. After that day, Sylvia boarded a plane to the United Kingdom, where she spent 2 years in postgraduate study. Darcy patiently traveled back and forth, accompanying her through the most difficult period and helping her emerge from that dark and gloomy shadow. Sylvia, after completing her studies and returning home, she and Darcy held their wedding as promised. The wedding was warm and grand. At the moment the rings were exchanged, in the hospital room, the heart monitor suddenly sounded, its green line stretching into a desperate, flat line. Beep, long, straight, declaring the end of everything, and announcing the beginning of everything. The end.